It's ready.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:34. Is there any public comment? I didn't see anything in my emails.
I didn't have anything.
Thank you. Would someone care to please review our norms?
Got
I'd
him.
be happy to.
Oh,
Or Guy.
no, go ahead, Scott, or whoever.
As a board, we'll focus on student outcomes, be open-minded, respect each other, value different viewpoints, be responsive and responsible to our community, make decisions based on data and facts, listen to each other, be reflective, run meetings that respect time, have concise agendas, are transparent, and follow Robert's rules.
Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
We have our consent agenda, which is essentially the meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept them or go do an assent agenda or whatever it is, assent. Yeah.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Michael. Corey?
Yeah, yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Diane?
Yep.
Michael?
Yes.
Okay. Consent agenda approved. Moving on to you, Randy.
Okay, so we've got a couple of items here. One of them is so updating the personnel benefits. So Sue can talk a little bit more about this, but the update is including health insurance changes for that begin on January 1st, 2021 for staff. So these are non-union and non-contracted employees, and it's due to the mandated statewide health insurance change. So the health insurance line is in addition to this matrix.
So everything else is the same basically from the last thing we've seen regarding this, except for health insurance?
Correct. Those are the only changes that were made. We prettied it up a little bit more, but there's no no material changes to it.
And just so you know, this is a statewide coverage plan, and so it isn't as if you have any ability to change it.
Okay, but we still have to approve it anyways?
You do.
Okay.
Motion that we approve it.
Thank you, Diane.
I'll second.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Corey?
Yes, approved.
Scott?
Approved, yes.
Diane?
Yes.
And Michael?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Approved.
Okay, the next item is there's an MOA for snow days to be remote this year, to give it an opportunity for us to see how that goes, given the fact that our model lends itself well to this. So the teachers were in agreement that we would try it for 1 year and see how it worked out. So I'm asking you to approve this MOA and agree to sign it.
Okay,
I'll make that motion.
thank you, Michael. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Corey. Any discussion?
Can I just clarify? So when there's a snow day, the kids will be doing remote learning. Is that what that says?
Correct. And so the teachers, it'll be a work day for them. Right now, the agreement states pretty clearly that if there's no school due to inclement weather, it's a non-work day for teachers.
And they're all fine with this, apparently, because
They were, yep. We discussed it. They've signed it. So.
And so they'll be able to work from home, so they won't have to travel to the building.
Correct.
Which is also predicated on the the phone lines and et cetera all working?
Well, part of it is because I'm working out the details. I'm sure something will go out. I'm anticipating next week on this. But my plan at this point is to be able to call it the afternoon before so that people are prepared. So it would happen when we know that there's a significant snow event coming, so that hopefully it's not, people know, and so kids and teachers are prepared for it. They'll have work to do, whether or not they have power or not.
Okay. If there's no more discussion.
Can I just ask another question?
Mhm.
And were any parents, I mean, is this just like you're asking the teachers, but nobody has any parents been asked?
No, this was an MOA between the teachers and the association and the boards.
Does it mean that they are necessarily remote learning days, or is it just the choice is there?
So it means that we will be likely doing it whenever we can. Does it mean that they will all be that? No. We've still got, we didn't make any changes when the state reduced the mandatory student days to 170. I didn't make any changes to the calendar yet to change that. So what that does is it offers us a little bit of flexibility around snow days, and as we've talked about, potentially putting in a parent-teacher conference day. And there will likely be days where the weather is unexpected in the morning, and it may end up being a snow day per se versus something that was a little more predictable. There'll be a little bit of wiggle room in it, and that's why we're just trying it for 1 year to see how it goes.
It seems like the last two sentences in the second paragraph, are clear enough in terms of what the what online instruction and learning schedule will be maintained to the extent that connectivity and power allows. They'll remain student instruction days and won't alter the plan. So theoretically as well, you wouldn't be cutting into days at the far end of the school year to make up.
And that's what was appealing, was the idea of having a more finite end date for everyone, especially this year.
Right. I hear your concerns, Diane, about parents and their ability to schedule their lives. I just, I think snow days are already kind of hard for parents to schedule and figure out. I don't know that this makes it that much better or worse.
I think it puts an undue burden on them to have to, now we have to, but I don't know. I'm not a parent, so.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, I mean, I'm trying to think it through. To be fair, my kids are remote learning, so every day is this. But before COVID, a snow day could throw a wrench in my schedule entirely. And I don't know that having them have to complete some stuff at home is that much worse, especially since everyone's sort of partially used to it on Wednesdays. I don't know that it is as much of a burden as maybe it used to be before all of this sort of set the stage.
There's a new norm in that way, certainly. And people seem to be coping pretty well with a level of adversity that simply wasn't there before. And I mean, my personal feeling is that this would be constructive insofar as people seem reasonably acclimated and adaptable these days, like you're saying. And also, it doesn't keep stacking days on at the far end of the school year, which seems valuable.
I suppose, if you're calling it in advance the day before, in some cases that could give parents more of an opportunity to plan for, the snow day or the kids that are going to be home versus what used to be the norm. You wouldn't find out till the morning of, and you're scrambling and trying to figure the day out. So, it doesn't change the hardship of working parents. Like if you have a snow day, there's a snow day and the kids are home. So it's just the difference is they're going to have lessons on the computer or homework to do. So I think it's a good point you raised, Diane, but I don't.
Well, for me, it's like, I understand everything you're saying, but then it becomes, well, who's covering for the child? So we have to find the child's coverage. And then are they going to be the ones that are then going to be trying to help that child, to get into those remote pieces? And it just, that's all. I just think that, I can vote for it, but sometimes I think this is where I start to have a problem when, it comes from the top down and the parents aren't asked, or, it's like, well, what are your thoughts? I just don't know if that's kind of thinking is something that I necessarily love. And I've probably, mentioned that before, that so yeah, try it for a year and see. But I think you have to find a way to get parents and the kids' feedback. And I haven't heard anybody mention any of those kinds of things.
Yeah, we didn't ask on this end of it. It was, let's see how it goes. There was so much unknown at the beginning of this year, and there was so much information coming at people. I'm sure you're right. We could have surveyed kids and parents. It was a decision that we made not to. We'll see how this year's goes and take it from there. I'm confident at the end of this year, everyone will have an opinion about it. So we'll get a whole lot of information to inform next year.
Yeah, I guess if we're gonna see how a year goes, this is the year to do it. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Michael?
Yes.
Diane?
I'll say yes, but under, just being mindful of the discussion that I guess, yes.
So yes, but you would like us to maybe think about this before next school year starts?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Scott?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Approved.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next agenda item is an FY21 year-to-date financials, and that's what just came in. So Sue, since maybe not everybody has this, I wonder if it makes sense for you to do a kind of a brief verbal overview. And again, I'll just remind you that we set this fall up so that last month you had FY20 year-end financials. Now you're experiencing FY21 anticipated in preparation for next month when you'll receive your first draft of FY22. So it's kind of to offer you the context within which we're operating. So Sue, you ready to jump in?
I am.
Can I
Briefly,
interrupt real quick?
Do you want to?
Do you guys want me to screen share it?
Oh, you could do
Sure.
that. Do you mind putting your camera on, or would you rather not?
are you talking to me?
Yes.
I apologize. I can't.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know if you knew it was off.
Yes, I do know it's off.
Do you want Celeste to screen share?
That's up to everybody else. I'm happy to talk through it, and you guys can all look at your documents, or Celeste can share it, whatever you guys would prefer.
They're right there.
You've got it.
Diane, would you like it screen shared or is that not good?
I don't have it. I don't have, if I'd gotten it, I could have sent it to Ron's iPad, but, so,
We didn't realize until right before the meeting started that it didn't come through, so it will, it's
So
been-
yes,
So I-
so why don't you screen share?
I can listen and I take notes, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I don't think there's, I'm not going to walk you through item by item. I want to give you just sort of the general overview.
Mhm.
So, which is this write-up right here. So basically, we're anticipating a surplus right now at the end of the year of about 122,000. And so there's a couple of reasons for that. The main reason is we anticipated having a deficit at the end of last year of 157, and we raised that in the FY21 budget, right? That was included. We wanted to make up our deficit from FY20, the deficit that we were anticipating. When we ended the year with a deficit of $34,000, not 157. And of course, we still raised that 157. So that sort of automatically puts us in a surplus situation. Even if our revenues and expenditures were exactly as we budgeted this year, we would be anticipating a surplus. So the next step of what we're anticipating for this year is we are anticipating having less in revenues and more in expenditures of about the same amount of money. We are anticipating less in expenditures mainly due to the reduction in staffing right now. So as you guys are aware, we did reduce one classroom teacher. We also reduced a paraeducator position, and both of those were through attrition. And in addition to that, we have one paraeducator position that is currently on leave. So there's a little bit of a savings there. So with the staffing, the savings in staffing are offset by a reduction in anticipated revenues, which is partially due to not running the after school program right now. So there's a little bit of reduction in revenues there. And in addition to that, we were anticipating a reduction in special ed reimbursement. The special ed reimbursement is sort of twofold. The reduction in paraeducators means where we have a reduction in SPED expenditures. So there's that side of it. We're also not providing the same level of special ed services at school right now than we would have if we were running a normal year where COVID was not happening. And in addition to that, we have a lot of our paraeducators that might have been doing special ed services under a normal year are, providing other functions. They're supporting health screenings, they're doing proctoring. So there's other things that our paraeducators are doing that aren't necessarily, the norm, and they're certainly not special ed reimbursable. Now, it's still early. We don't really know where we're going to land. We could end up having additional savings in programs like the enrichment program. And after school right now, I'm estimating that at about a 50% run. Right now, we're not running the program. If we start up, I've included some anticipated costs for that, but we don't know whether or not after school is going to start at this point. So things are still a little bit up in the air for where we're going to land. The last piece of information is on the health benefits, which we briefly discussed earlier, that we're now going to be adhering to the new state contract, which goes into effect in January. And there could be some increased costs in staffing due to the contract. People haven't made their elections yet. We just started open season, and hopefully we'll have that information prior to you voting the FY22 budget.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Sue?
She makes it sound easy.
Sounds,
That's good. That's good, Diane.
It's like,
So Sue, we haven't asked our current sixth graders where they're planning on going. That's always something we start collecting soon, but would that impact the amount of money per se that's in the budget for the secondary tuition?
Not what you're looking at right now, because right now you're just looking at anticipated. So
Well,
that will impact what we prepare for the FY22 budget.
Right, this is still
Next month.
FY21.
Yep.
Are you hearing any, I don't know if I want to open this can of worms. But is everyone doing, are we doing okay? I'm hearing we're not providing the level of special ed as we normally would. Are families okay in this?
So I think when I talk about the same level of special education, it has to do with students not necessarily being in school, where we budgeted for a certain amount of para support at a certain cost that isn't being provided simply because the student isn't there or because the students no longer need that level of support. I think Randy might better be able to speak to whether or not we're not providing certain special education services, but I don't believe from what I have seen and heard, and that there's no level of support that's not being provided that needs to be provided. Is that correct, Randy?
Right, that's my understanding as well. So, the IEP teams are the ones who develop the IEP and determine the level of service. So families, we have some families who are staying completely remote. So the IEP team determines, what kind of service will we provide under those conditions? How will we provide services? It might, for some families, it is pretty different than how it is if they're in person, but the families and the teams have agreed to those services. When they're in person, it's still the IEP team, regardless of the programming. So I would say that if you have a family or you're hearing about that, you should come back to the IEP team, and parents are a required member of that. So I know that teams are working incredibly hard to provide appropriate services for kids. And in some cases, it's more complicated right now than in others. But anything that's in IEPs, we're providing.
Right.
So anything else on FY21? Julio, ready for me to move on?
Is everyone all set?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, I am.
Okay. So this next agenda item is a mandatory policy for you. It's a new Title IX policy, prevention of sexual harassment. As you can see, it is gigantically long.
That is.
It is far more procedure than it is actual policy, and it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. We have Paul Eaton as our Title IX coordinator. We have a Title IX investigator, Tim Oliver. And the two of them and myself have probably attended over 10 hours of training on this topic. We also had our attorney provide a 2.5-hour training on Title IX to all of our directors and principals, leaders in our system. So there is nothing you can change to it. But it's a lot. If there's a report made, you're looking at an 80-day investigation process with a lot of detail. We're attending carefully to it. And I just want you to know that, I'm certainly taking this very seriously. So this is the approval step. If you approve it, then you need to go through an adoption next month. So just to remind you of that.
I have a quick question. Is this written by VSBA, or who is writing this?
So this was the policy came from VSBA. There was, I believe, a few attorneys in the state who worked on it together.
Okay, well, I feel like there's some typos that we should address before we do anything with this, or I don't know if we can approve it and then get them to adjust those and adopt it, or if we need to hit a pause button, but there's definitely some typos that.
So if it's up to you. You're not adopting it yet. So if you want to go through right now as a board at all the typos and sort of identify them, then you could probably send it to VSBA for their input and see if they're going to be what they're going to do, over the next few weeks.
My point of view as a school board member would be, it would be the obligation of the FBA to do their own proofreading. I didn't read it for typographical errors. I did flip through it enough to see that it was, vastly complex realm of legal, paralegal and professionals. And my point of view would be, if I feel like doing the typographical stuff at this meeting doesn't seem like a great use of our time.
I agree. I mean, the most obvious error was on packet page 11 under 2A.
A second, let us get to 11. Is it page 11?
Packet page 11.
Okay, I went past it, sorry. Okay. And where? 2A.
2A.
Oh,
B.
Actual knowledge.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I didn't read every word of this entire thing. I read a lot of the beginning, and then as it became clear that there was a lot more, I did not keep reading every word. So I can't go through this and give you every typo. I just don't know that. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that it needs.
Right. So, I mean, you can approve it or not. I have Celeste email VSBA and ask them, let them know that you've identified typos in the document and that, prior to formal adoption, you're
right.
requesting that those be fixed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
I'm fine with that.
you could also, maybe even to cover yourself right now, you could acknowledge as a board that you're approving it, understanding that there are typos, and that your approval is
pending.
Or it's understanding that those will be fixed, so that you don't have to go back and approve it once it has been fixed and start over again.
Okay. So we would make a motion along the lines of we make a motion to approve this Title IX policy pending typographical error correction by VSBA.
Yes. And so that you can email VSBA about that on behalf of the Mettawee board.
Okay. Can I get a motion regarding that?
Yeah, I'll take care of that.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion then. No, what's the motion?
Oh, did someone make that motion? Can I get a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we accept this policy. And we are looking for the typos to be fixed before we actually approve it next month. That close? I wasn't sure.
Works for me.
Okay, good enough.
I thought you were saying to go ahead and approve it, but that approval was subject to with the understanding that those typos would be corrected.
Right. That's what I just wrote down. Motion to approve the policy contingent on corrections by VSBA.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any further discussion?
Do we have to say which typos we want corrected right now, or?
I don't think you do.
I don't.
It's acknowledging that they're in there.
Beyond what our role is. We're kind of playing lawyer then. I mean.
Yeah, well, and does it affect the meaning is my question.
I don't want to affect the meaning, I don't think, but I don't want to put up a policy on our website and out in accessed by the public that has pretty obvious just errors. And I get that the VSBA is probably very busy and has bigger fish to fry, but like.
Well, this is important though. You can't dismiss it. I think they need to clean the document up, period.
Right.
So.
A note saying all typos are in the original document and not from the school district. If you put it up if we put it up, we can just, this is as determined by the VSBA.
I mean, we have the next meeting to adopt or not adopt, right? We can go back to the drawing board then. I'm fine with approving the content of it. I mean, it's a mandatory policy anyways, and the content is important.
Right.
I just think it's important that it looks right. I think it's important that it is right. Any further discussion? Okay. Corey,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Diane,
Yes.
Michael,
Approve, yes.
thank you. Approved. Moving on.
Okay, so the next agenda item is, we submitted to you my superintendent report and Brooke's principal report, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to ask any questions or touch base with us for a few minutes on what we shared with you.
I had one question, which was about the long distance learners who you were supposed to know more about sometime in early November. And I wonder if that kind of played out. I'm looking for it in the packet, but if that played out in terms of, the real world, so to speak.
So
Am I referring to one of your reports? I think I am, right?
yes. So in my report, I listed that Mettawee had 49 distance learners at the start of the year, and 18 that were returning in November. So they returned last week. So a relatively high number came back for Mettawee.
Okay, I was just curious about, and how that all played out.
Do you mean like what the experience was for them transitioning back? Is that
Yeah.
what you're referring
Yeah.
to?
Yeah.
Yeah, Brooke, do you want to take a minute to just sort of respond to what it was like last week in the beginning of the
Sure. I feel like the transition went really well. Our staff did a great job showing this new students our expectations of social distancing, wearing their mask, hand washing, all the parts that we are really important to keep them safe. And the kids were so excited to be back. Lots of smiles, and it was so great to have them back in the routine. And the parents were happy to have them back. So I would feel like all the staff members thought the process was smooth to add more students. Every classroom had new students that joined. And we're really eager, hoping that maybe in January we'll have more return. So I think it's been going very well for our students. They're happy to be with their friends, to be able to be outdoors. I really wanted to pull together a slideshow and share it with all of you, but lots of outdoor pictures. Art is being taught outside, PE. We had Mr. Harmon's classes last week, bird watching. They had blinds up, and it was wonderful to see the kids with binoculars checking out the birds. So I think a lot of kids are just engaged with their learning and socially and emotionally doing well since they've been back.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about either of our reports?
I was a little curious about what the new process is, what the issue is with cleaning versus disinfecting. Are there concerns? Are there concerns about safety, or are they just sort of concerns about?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I think, it's hard because I think there's lots of different things. We're updating everything right now. We're finalizing a new document where we synthesized with all the new guidance, the Strong and Healthy Start guidance. There was additional information, details added. So I think the concern is just making sure that people want to know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. The clarity around what's my responsibility as a custodian. I don't want to not be doing something I should be. So we've got a document that's just about done. I had it reviewed by a few key people this morning. I think we got clarity on things. So I expect it'll probably not go out till Thursday or Friday, given what my calendar looks like the next couple of days, but it'll be out this week. And I think people will feel more comfortable once they see it.
Okay.
Our custodians are definitely working very, very hard. I think everyone, this is obviously a whole new terrain for everyone, but I have, often thought that our custodial staff tend to be more behind the scenes in general at our schools. Things rapidly shifted this year, and they're much more front and center. People are watching what they're doing much more carefully, and their work has a very different meaning than it has ever in the past. I'm working really hard with Greg Harrington to make sure that our custodians understand what their responsibilities are, that we have common understanding of practices. When there's differing of perspective or understanding, we're getting it addressed immediately. So I think people are working really hard and doing a good job.
Are we having, I assume there's gonna just like be restrictions around travel? Was your thoughts with the holiday thinking?
Yes, there are restrictions now. Those we are expecting them to will be enforcing them. We're expecting people to follow them. Principals are sending communication out to families around travel. We are communicating weekly with staff around travel. So, we expect people to be following the guidance. Best case scenario is people stay home. I think many of us look around and realize that this is an opportunity for some 2020 changes to Thanksgiving. Staying home is probably the best and safest thing for everyone.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. I just didn't know if there were options for families that are traveling to like be remote learners for a small period, or if
that exists all the time right now. So people are quarantining. We have kids quarantining all the time throughout our system. Our system is designed to allow for that. So if students, for whatever reason, need to quarantine, they can, and we will fully be expecting all families who travel to follow any quarantine guidance that's required when they come back. I would expect that after Thanksgiving that there'll be a higher number of students in remote instruction for, whatever it is, 10 to 14 days after the holiday. I think we should all expect that.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay.
All right. So the next, based on our meeting before, we included a policy governance activity. I'm looking at you. Everyone's looking a little tired. I could be wrong. You might not all be tired. You might just look a little tired. So if you look in your packet, we went through, Celeste and I went through the activities that you had done last year, and as well as activities that we had from other protocols. So I included one in here. And so I guess the agenda item is going through this activity. I guess it could start with, do you want to go through the activity? Julie, I'm not entirely sure how you would like to approach this, but it's here and you can certainly go through it if you'd like to.
Well, did everyone have an opportunity to review?
I have looked at it, but I haven't put a ton of time into it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm same. And I actually, the hard part for me was I had to go and find, there was, I don't even have the date on it, but it was the beginning of 2020. It was our meeting in January where I pulled the draft policy governance policies from Mettawee. That's sort of what we used when we reviewed these.
I don't know. This is what I pulled, so I don't know, but it doesn't have a date. Let me see.
Because we don't have official policies.
Right.
That would work for this activity.
The draft ones, I think, are the ones that you've used in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just didn't know if everyone else was able to pull those.
Well, this is what I have. I have no idea if it's the right little baby, but it's a draft Mettawee government policy. I've got it all marked up from what I've done in the past. So
I think that's the one.
I mean, that's what I found.
You've got like a list of executive limitation policies and then board management,
board,
delegation, and governance. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All over from when I've used it in the past. This
So
is it.
everyone okay then with going through this?
As long as it doesn't take too long.
As long as, as long as we don't fall asleep.
Corey, do you have a copy of these?
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I think Celeste sent them to me, but I don't have them printed out. She did send them.
Okay.
Nothing else. It's good discussion. If
Okay.
you work it through with us, just.
Right. So there's a couple
Right.
of different ways you can do this. Typically, if we were in person, you
Right.
would each individually read through and look at the policies and kind of answer. It's an individual process. And then you come back together and you discuss it together as a group. You can, that is certainly one option. We could do it here. We could pause the recording, give everybody, 10 minutes or so to read through it and jot down some notes and come back together. The alternative is to just work through it together as a group right now and discuss it. And I don't know that it necessarily requires a high level of facilitation. The questions, the questions kind of guide you through the process. So I think either way is really appropriate. And I think it's worth it to spend a minute or two talking about which approach you'd like to take and then diving into it.
Well, personally, I would love to do it in a collective way. I do have the paperwork. I'm just finding a lot of this stuff baffling. So doing it en masse, I feel would be a helpful thing. But of course, whatever the majority decides is best is what we'll do.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
I would too.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
got
right.
it.
We'll just talk it through.
Yeah.
Okay. So the scenario is the school board is aware that the CEO is about to reduce the number of kindergarten hours that will be offered. It knows that some parents will be unhappy with this decision. What should the board do? And so the first question is, what has the board already said in its relevant policies? The first area being ends.
Right.
So you would look through each of these areas and identify, which addresses something related to this already that you've got in place.
So in looking and reviewing these policies and the ends policies, there's not really anything that's super specific about this. The 1.0 is that we will educate students to be self-directed, healthy, self-fulfilled people and active civic-minded citizens of the world. We will achieve this at a cost reasonably comparable to other BRSU schools of similar size. I see that potentially being an area where if we're eliminating, if we're vastly off from other schools that aren't eliminating hours, that could potentially be an issue. I didn't really see much else under ends.
I think you're right. I think don't read too much into it. Ends policies are likely not going to
Where
be
you're gonna, yeah.
right.
So the next section was executive limitations. which starts at 2.0.
Oh, there it is. Hmm.
Seems like that applies kind of because it's talking about respect to interactions with students, parents, guardians, you know, that shall not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are untimely, unclear, undignified, or unnecessary or intrusive. So am I understanding that right? Like if you all of a sudden change the hours and it was a hardship, I mean, that it seems like that's kind of touching on that, but if you're
Well,
changing, yeah.
go ahead,
Well,
Are you-
yeah.
Vanya.
What, Diane?
Well, I just am looking under that 2.1 also, and I'm looking at, you know, I guess the communication word, a system of communication between and those parents, that parent group comes back up. Input on significant decisions is number 8. And I guess I think that sometimes one of the things that bothers me about policy is that I'm just not convinced that parents have enough input. That it's always in hindsight. We'll get the data later. So that
I'm not understanding what you mean that they don't have enough input.
I get what she means.
the decision that the CEO is going to decide to cut back kindergarten days or whatever the scenario is. And so the decision is coming from the top down without thinking about what people in the community, if we have stakeholders, I would think that you would want to make an attempt more consistently or something to them saying, what are your thoughts on this? That it shouldn't be done and then say, how did it go? It should be done like, we're thinking of doing this. What are your thoughts? What, you know, could you, so that's what I'm thinking. I may not be able to articulate that enough, Michael, but I feel like 7, 8, and 9 in that area is something that for me, I always go, oh.
So you're talking about 2.1, 7, 8, and 9, right?
Yep.
And we don't know by this scenario whether any of that has or hasn't been done, right? It doesn't tell us, we don't have any information about what led up to this decision or how it was executed. But as you're talking about, hey, this is happening, one of the executive limitations is that we do expect there to be a level of communication through this process.
Right.
So I hear you saying 2.1 addresses potentially, it could be one of the policies that is directly addresses this issue.
For me, because if Scott's going to say, you know, untimely, unclear, I don't know. For me, yes, that's what I'm saying, Randy. I just think that, you know, I guess I need to know that the community is being heard. That's it for me. I'm so right there that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I mean, this scenario isn't clear if this is like, are we midstream and we're reducing hours, or is this like at an April meeting and we say in September we're reducing the number of kindergarten hours?
Right, and all you're doing is looking for any policies that address something related to this. So it's an exercise in trying to determine, is this covered by policy governance and how and where? So I think that, you know, Diane brought up one that was clear, right? That could be, but we don't know. but that covers it.
Right.
And 2.8 probably does as well,
Yeah.
along the exact same lines.
Yeah, I had 2.83 and 4. I mean, 4-ish, right? Because the media coverage, we could really even consider just like getting blasted on Facebook by parents.
So are you saying 2.8, not 2. Okay, communication support to the board. Okay, I hadn't gotten that far.
And also monitoring data. I mean, if this is a decision that's being made, it should be being made on some basis of fact.
And that's, you know, you want to know, you want to go into, and I just think that in my, you can't, you have to be able to do that. If you want to be transparent, if you want to have the community that's going to support your school, if you want to have feedback and go on data-driven things, then we need to have the data that says parents are not going to mind if we do this and this and this.
But if I'm understanding this, the purpose of this a little better as we're having this conversation, the part of this scenario is putting on us the fact that the CEO, and can't we just pick a choice that would sort of make it impersonal? Like, budgetarily speaking, we are in a stuck position and the number of kindergarten hours has to be reduced. Might that be something that would, be a decision that, I guess what I'm wondering is a decision like that, is there the possibility that it could take place beyond the level of where the local school board has any control over that, and we just have to be, so to speak, the sort of messengers of the bad news? I'm just asking, is that how what the kind of exercise is predicated on?
Right.
Here's bad news. We don't know, we can't control the fact that we're getting it. We've gotten it. And
right.
Now is that?
Yeah, so I think, Michael, you're on exactly the right track. The question is, who makes the unpopular choices? And so the exercise is designed to help you as a board to see, okay, in a situation like this, where really, what is your role as a board, and what is the CEO's or superintendent's role in the work? And so by identifying at this stage, what are the relevant policies, and then working through the rest of the questions, you figure out. And Diane, I think this is a great exercise because you've shared, and it's coming up again for you. What is the board's role and what is the superintendent's role, and how do we interface on topics related to the community? And so I think going through this is important. The purpose of this is for you to see, okay, I see how this works. I either am like, okay, this feels good and this feels appropriate to me, or, it might not, right? It might feel like I understand it, where this decision-making lies. And with policy governance, as we work through it, it may or may not feel good to you or feel like something you're interested in. But that's precisely why we're walking through the process, is to kind of engage in learning about how a policy governance board responds. So Michael did, I think, a really good job of kind of summarizing that. So at the end of this, you will have experienced, wow, okay, I see this hopefully a little differently.
And I'm not advocating anything. I'm just trying to understand.
I don't think you are either.
Supposed to fit into this, and I guess that's why I was confused when I read through it prior to the meeting. Of like, I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to be doing here, and I guess it just kind of puts you through the paces of what the procedural check-ins would be, right? What are our relevant policies about this? Do we have any?
Right. And how does this work between the board and the CEO in a situation such as this?
So Randy, in a situation like this, would the superintendent preemptively cite the policy with decision-making, or is it just catching up after the fact, us trying to justify it by going through to the policies?
So it sort of depends on when in the process you were notified of this. Because this scenario could happen before, during, or after a process. And so the answer to that would be, I think, dependent on where it is. But how we operate right now with TNG is it's the policy that's being addressed, or the policy covered by any particular agenda item is always listed right on the agenda.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it links.
Right.
So if well, we'll see, because this might not even make it on an agenda necessarily as a decision making. So let's walk through the process if we can. Okay. So are there any other executive limitations that jump out at you other than 2.8 and 2.1? You can jump on to 3 if you are trying to look at the board management delegation.
Yeah, I think there's more stuff in this.
Mm-hmm.
I found stuff under 3.3 in delegation to the superintendent. This was like number 1. I mean, we develop policies instructing the superintendent to achieve specified results for specified recipients at a specified cost. I mean, so we don't know any of the details of this scenario, but one could assume that there's probably cost reasons that kindergarten hours would be reduced.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of where, if we've boxed you into a corner money-wise, that would be where that would fall. And then number 3, under that same 3.3, number 3, if you're interpreting our policies, you're authorized to make these decisions.
Mm-hmm. Something out to anybody in 3?
Yeah. I mean,
3.4. I mean, and again, this is like, if we're blindsided by this would matter, but like under 3.4, number 2, we're supposed to be acquiring monitoring information from the superintendent. So I guess it's a big assumption that this is just, we're just being blindsided. I feel like because we were just blindsided by this scenario. Where is the financial stuff in here?
That's 2.6,
Okay.
2.3, 2.4. I think 2.6 is asset protection.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 3 is financial conditions and activities. 4
So
is-
how do I get the draft policies? I was pointed to just our policy, the Mettawee School District's policies on the BRSU site, but they're not the same thing as these, I don't think.
I think Celeste can get you that portion of the packet. It's not gonna be super helpful right now.
Right, no, I know. I had asked for it and she had pointed me to this, but I think I didn't ask for the draft policy. So that's, oh,
So we can have Celeste send them to you.
okay, I'll email her, yeah.
Okay, so governance process? Anything in there? The only thing I could come up with is like the governing style about how the board will govern lawfully observing principles of policy governance model with an emphasis on outward vision rather than internal preoccupation. And in strategic leadership more than administrative detail. So as long as we feel that decisions are being made in a forward-thinking way and that we're focusing our work on the broader, in the broader sense and not on the nitty-gritty details. So the next part of the question is, according to the board's policies, does the scenario refer to anything that has been delegated to the CEO already?
You know, and so 3.0, the board's sole official connection to the operational organization, its achievements and the conduct will be through the superintendent.
Right, and I mean, the 3.3 is where you're delegated all of these. I mean, 3.3, like all of 3.3.
Yeah, that whole section of 3.3 is where we're giving the authority and what the parameters of that authority is.
Right. And like number 4, the board may change its ends and executive limitations policy, thereby shifting the boundary between board and superintendent domains. By doing so, the board changes the latitude of choice given to the superintendent. But as long as any particular delegation is in place, the board will respect and support the superintendent's choices. So that tells me that what should we do? I mean, the last line of the scenario, what should the board do? Well, you either change your policies in that specific area and ends in executive limitations, or you say we support you in what you're doing.
What did you just read, Julie?
I read 3.3, number 4.
3.3.
Yep.
3, number 4.
Number 4.
I heard a yawn.
Yeah. Okay.
But in determining whether the superintendent is working within the parameters, I mean, obviously it needs to be backed up with why they've limited the hours, like for budgetary reasons. I mean, if we as a board felt that that wasn't being demonstrated, that's where we would have the right to question that, I guess, right? I mean, you can't just take it at the word. I mean, it has to be shown why it was done, and that has to fit, that the needs of the students are being met and that it's being done at the appropriate cost. And that, if there was no need that was being shown to cut the hours back, we would have the right to question that, right?
So if this scenario came up and we said, the board could say, we need some monitoring reports before this goes into effect.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We would be able to ask you to show us some reports that needs are being met or costs are too high or whatever. We could demand of you some data.
So it depends on, so that depends on the scope of delegation that's been established. So as long as the superintendent is working within the scope of what has been delegated to them, they can do their job. They can do the work without necessarily needing approval from you. So if the board was concerned that the superintendent was not working within the scope of that, you could request information to make sure that exactly what you said. It would be essentially, and part of this is that we would develop a monitoring plan, sort of how I interpret the policy that I would present to you, independent of a scenario. So I would say, this is my interpretation of this policy. This is what I understand it to mean. And this is how I intend on monitoring performance in this area. That's part of this process that we go through together. You would say either, yeah, we agree as a board that this is a reasonable interpretation and we feel fine about how you're proposing to monitor. Or you might turn around and say, we have some questions or concerns around your interpretation. This is how we as a board see it. And this is how we'd like to consider monitoring. And we go back and forth, but eventually we end up with the policy and we end up the interpretation and the monitoring plan for many of the policies. So in an ideal world, all of that's done. And so we all have a collective understanding of what I would need to do in a situation like this to work within the policies, and you would understand what I had the authority to do. We don't have any of that done right now. So it's much more nebulous and it feels much more open to possible, like the possibility of somebody doing something rogue and you having no control over that. But
yeah, I think that's where all of our angst is coming.
But the interpretation, but it just takes time. Like, we're in the process of going through that right now with Deconic and Green. We take a policy, we work on the interpretation, how we're going to monitor it, and then we talk through it.
See, I think that's I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just that that comes after, that comes as part of the process. And really it's a multi-year process of going through that.
I guess in reading these, I was unclear. It was sort of like I was having this chicken and egg kind of crisis of how do you, I wasn't connecting the dots in terms of how we would have gotten ourselves into the situation that the scenario begins with. How did we get, as Diane pointed out at the beginning, how did we get to a place where we've just had this significant alteration handed to us, so to speak, without our being aware of it prior to kaboom? This is what's coming down for the kindergarten hours coming, coming up imminently. So in any case, I don't want to go completely off base here. I'm having a hard time connecting these dots.
Let's just work through let's just keep answering the questions.
Okay.
Because hopefully it will lead us to an end. And it may make sense for for us to think about bringing, either Val or Jackie in to talk through some of this now that you've gone through the work you've gone through and you're finding yourself in this point of what's actually going on here. We've gone through enough exercises, I think, with hearing from TNG and your discussions, you're getting greater understanding of where some of your apprehension lays. So I think, but let's keep going here.
So 2A, does the scenario suggest the CEO is in compliance with a reasonable interpretation of the board's ends and executive limitations policies? I mean, as written, I feel like as written. Then I keep going back to the fact that, like, if you came to us and said we're cutting kindergarten hours, I would have so many more things to say. Do you want to move to 2B?
Sure. Yeah, because
Okay, does the scenario reflect behavior consistent with the board's governance process and board management delegation policies? I think the really hard part for all of us is accepting the, is that we don't like the scenario, right? So, but is it consistent with our governance process and board management delegation policies? That specific question, I think my interpretation is that it is. I mean, our governance process is that we do not make, our work is not focused on the administrative or programmatic means of attaining the effects, which is under 4.1, number 2.
I think one of the challenges is, is just, as you said, you're getting everyone sort of thinking about the idea, the interpretation or the idea that this just is dropped on you and you're void of any level of context. So it's hard I think for probably everybody, including myself, to get past that. Because you're wondering, was something else violated leading up to this? Was there something else that happened leading up to this scenario that wasn't followed? And we don't have that information. So really the question is, does the superintendent, does the CEO have the authority to come to you and say, we're reducing hours? In knowing that in real life, it wouldn't happen quite like that.
Well, and I'm even thinking now, one scenario that would make this easier to justify in my mind would be, let's say, some kind of a weather event where we had some sort of a flood or a roof blew off, or suddenly the money that we thought was there to do this, if we don't do this other thing, we literally don't have a structure for people to go to school in. I don't know. I'm just coming up with my little Wizard of Oz ways of making this work in my own head, so I can get the questions answered.
I know, yeah, which I get where you're coming from, but I think if we just specifically, like, if you look at, so the board governance, that's in 4. Like, if you look at that, I mean, what is that saying? And is that telling you that the superintendent has the authority to make this decision?
Can I put out another example? And I'm just wondering if it relates. It's obviously in a much less severe way, but I mean, in our actual meeting, we talked about the superintendent has, the BRCU has decided that any snow days would now be not snow days and it would be remote learning. And Diane kind of questioned that, like that could create a hardship, but it was already decided. It wasn't really up for discussion. So is that, it's obviously less severe than reducing kindergarten hours, but it's still in principle similar where this decision's been made. Does that relate? I'm not understanding that right, or is it similar in some ways?
I mean, it's scheduling stuff, right? Like, this is scheduling. Mm-hmm. Who sets the schedule? We don't set the schedule as a board. We don't pick the math program as a board. We are not involved in any of the administrative or programmatic means of attaining the effects that we ask for. We ask for effects, and then we qualify what they can or cannot do to get these effects, but we don't tell them, well, no, I take that back. We ask for effects, and we tell her what she can't do to achieve them. We don't tell her what she can. We don't tell her how she can schedule. We don't tell her what books or programs to use. We say, this is what we want to achieve. you can't do this, this, or this to get there.
So we have the authority to shape the parameters, but not to make the decisions. Right? Our authority is making the framework, but not making the decisions.
That's right.
From what
So once we've made that framework and you've made that a decision, even if we don't agree with it, our hands are somewhat tied. And I'm not saying that in a confrontational way. I'm just as an understanding that I guess that is almost a separation of power. Like we have the power to formulate the, the parameters and the structure of it, but we don't have the power to say, oh, we don't like that decision, or, that's kind of.
That's right. And in the big scheme of things, it's about ultimately you as a board review the interpretations and monitoring. And as it relates to ends policies, are we working towards achieving our ends? And that then comes back on kind of the superintendent evaluation process, right? And the accountability of the superintendent. That's where it all comes back. That's how it all kind of loops back around. Because if at the end of the day, you're not, that you have your ends established and your goals and priorities as a board, and if you don't feel like I'm achieving those through the actions I'm taking, then you'll be clear that I'm not taking you in the direction that you want to go, which obviously isn't really this. We're getting off a little bit more about sort of the process in general, but there could be certainly some very compelling reason as to why this kindergarten thing came to play, even though on face value it's startling to everyone, including me. But as Michael pointed out, there are conditions and circumstances that could have led to that decision that could have been a key piece to achieving your ends. Or following somebody's point, the financial accountability and asset protection that I'm required to do could have led to a number of decisions that were hard to make. And that could have been one of them, right? There's like a whole slew of things that I have the authority as a superintendent under policy governance decisions to make. What do we do? What do we not do when we're faced with untenable conditions or unexpected conditions? And I still need to lead us through that.
But as a board, we would be in a position where we could question you about some of those decisions, right, that you'd made and why they were made.
Sure. And you'd want to bring it back to the policy, and you'd bring it back to the interpretation and monitoring to ensure that I was working within what I had the authority to do and not what was in your authority.
So let's say in this scenario that you came to us and there was some massive budgetary reason that we needed to save a bunch of money. But then this was your solution, was to cut the number of kindergarten hours. And then the board was able to look at the budget and say, yeah, okay, like X number of dollars was saved by this decision. But there's this sort of fluffy area that could have saved us X number of dollars. Like, I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
not that sports aren't important, but like, hey, we could have saved 50 grand on sports and instead we saved 50 grand on early education. It's not that we're powerless. It's that in that scenario, we would need to adjust our policies to say something about prioritizing early education. Like we would have to we can do something.
Yeah, but it would be in that scenario you just laid out, according to policy governance, it would be after the fact.
That's
right.
The horse would be out of the barn.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That
our hands are tied.
Yeah. And so you would realize if we walk through that, if you as a board thought, well, this is not how I want to operate. I do not want X, Y, or Z types of decisions to be made. We are not going to give the superintendent the authority to make, we're going to, as you said earlier, Julie, we're going to shift that. You have the authority to do this, but you do not have the authority to do this. And we're shifting that because we as a board disagree with not only that decision, you know, the rationale, or we don't see that it in any way supports our ends policies. And we want to revisit that. That's how it would work.
But backing out, we're all working on these policies together as a team, the board and the superintendent together, to get to a point where we don't have sort of an adversarial situation. We're trying to create this positive framework for the decision making, and you know, so to me, that's what we also have to think about, is that we're working on this as a team in advance of it, so it doesn't get to a point that we've overlooked something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not designed in any way to be adversarial. It's very much a partnership. And this I can say in my, you know, just personally, my experience with working through this with Taconic and Green is that it is a really interesting partnership. And it's awesome in many, many ways. I always talk to the executive committee when we're planning and discussing things. I make them up to speed about anything that's that I'm thinking or that I'm doing for discussion, so that they're aware of it. And it is a relationship that's built on what's good for the organization. And the more I understand about their priorities and their goals and their values, I then bring that back to budget development. Like, you know, so how does the budget reflect the values and the priorities? And how does the work we're doing reflect your goals, your priorities, your values? Because we get to know each other really well. That whole interpretation and monitoring process really builds relationship. It's a really dynamic partnership in understanding. And we learn about each other. You know, ultimately, I feel like my responsibility is to understand your needs, and you're reflecting your community, so that I can lead in a way that supports your values and goals, your community's values and goals, and the whole system is designed to support that. I just for the record, am crystal clear that slashing kindergarten in your community would not be a great move aligned with your values and goals, right? Like, so anyway, just feel like, even though this is not about me, I'm feeling like I need to say that to you.
It's an unlikely scenario that would come up in our case.
It is.
Collectively speaking.
I just want to point out that I have 8:02. So I don't know if you guys want to continue talking about this for a couple more minutes, or if we want to shift to the next thing on the agenda, which was the community engagement piece.
Yeah, I think that we just ended on a really good note on the policy governance. I mean, we kind of drifted away from the actual lesson, but I think that was a really good discussion that gave me a better understanding. I mean, I don't know. I thought that was a good discussion. So
I vote for shifting on. I, continue to struggle with the fact that it's suddenly dark at 4:45 in the afternoon.
It's hard.
Which has really been a struggle lately. But in any case, yeah, that would be good.
Okay. Diane, you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. So the next part is our community engagement piece, which I'm trying to remember. I think we were supposed to sort of finalize a few questions.
Huh.
And I did have a question. I don't know if Celeste is still on, but maybe I can email her tomorrow. But I was just wondering about our deadlines, because we had discussed putting together a survey that would go out in the school report, the annual report for the schools. And I was and I don't remember if we discussed this or not, but maybe also in the town reports so that it would kind of get to people regardless of whether or not they pay attention to the school annual report.
I think that's a good idea because I'm all about the communication piece.
Okay.
Imperative.
And so is your question, Julie, about the timing of that?
Yeah, I'm gonna find out. I can find out the Pollitt town report deadline, and then if someone can find out Rupert.
Okay.
Michael, right? Michael?
Yeah. I can do
Since
that.
Arlene's not here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
And then we'll find out from Celeste the timing for the school.
It's going to be early January.
That's what I'm gonna say. Ours is always due like the first week in January.
Okay. And I think
So-
we're
okay.
in that same general.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so that gives us,
What- I'm finding out the deadline to submit a questionnaire, so to speak.
yeah, we were gonna put a small survey in the town report and like a link to where they could fill it out electronically, but also like a sheet that if they so choose, they could just, cut it out and mail it into us.
Right.
That takes care of that. And then I think we had decided that we wanted really like short questions and very few questions. So I didn't know if anyone had written down anything.
Said, what does it mean to you for our graduates to be college and career ready? That's one of the questions that we talked about last time.
Right. So I had written that down too. I had, what does it mean to be ready to leave high school? I thought that was a little more like, I don't know. Maybe it's a little too little.
Too little. What do you mean? That it's too narrow in terms of that scope? I kind of like it because we're dealing with our clientele are bringing us up to that point, so to speak, before they go out into the wider world.
Well, I guess my thought on that is, I mean, so when you leave high school, we educate through high school. That's what our system does. So it's important to acknowledge and plan for that. So, and then my thought was, well, okay, so when you leave high school, what do you need? Like, not everybody leaves high school being prepared or willing to go into a 4 to 8 year,
Right.
education.
Right.
So what about everyone else? So that was sort of why I was thinking and we did address that in college or career ready, but it's just sort of like, I just kind of wanted to get to the point of like, what do you want kids to leave here? Like, what does it mean to be ready to leave high school? But I feel like it could be worded better, I guess was my point about it being too small. Like, is it, I don't want to lead anybody, but I don't want to.
Maybe you need to add in there to be successful. I mean, you could leave high school, you could leave in 11th grade, but.
So what does it mean to be ready to be successful after high school?
Yeah, or moving forward, or, I mean, as you say, we want to keep it simple, but to be,
Maybe you could preface the question with the setup and then that would still be the question, but like say something like, in light of wanting our graduates to be successful, what do you think it means to be able to finish high school or graduate?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
There might be also the possibility of framing a question around allowing the person answering to come up with, what are there any particular skill sets that you think are crucial for success? And let them write them in. Math, I don't know, whatever it may be.
Right. My general idea was to have like 3 questions and have one of them be specifically about values.
Good.
One of them be specifically about skills.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of them be like this was the other one, which is sort of more about like what does it mean what do we want people leaving our system to look like? But I guess we're covering that in values and skills. I don't know.
If you've got a skill set and you've got values and they can identify them, then haven't you identified the answer to your question?
I think you're right. So maybe we only need 2 questions? Or do you think we're missing something?
I think we might be missing something, but I'm not sure. I have to think about it.
You're partly keeping the questions fairly short and simple because we don't want to lead the person answering like, oh, we want to know what academic qualifications or we want to know what skills. I mean, don't we want them to kind of let us know? Like maybe the most important thing to them is that they're graduating with values such as perseverance and determination, or maybe for that person answering, they do think that it's computer skills or something. So, I think the idea of keeping a question shorter is a good one, so we get a wider range of answers.
Right. The other thing that I potentially was thinking about was sort of trying to rate how our community feels about things like early ed or expanding pre-K hours or like foreign language skills or other things like that. Like, is that where we could come at it with a 3rd question? But I like the idea of, what values do you think it's important for graduates to have? And what are the most important skills for graduates to have? That covers so much ground in 2 questions. I'm kind of lost on the 3rd.
So do we want to ask them, do you have any other thoughts?
What is the purpose? What is it you are doing this for? Why are you doing this?
I think we want to better understand what our employers desire as in terms of outcomes. And that's where I'm a little puzzled as to why we have to keep the questions so completely pared down. Because if we do it that way, then the answers are going to be very broad and general. And my thinking is that we may want to have a few more questions. And like Julie suggested a minute ago, make them more about specific things that we want to get a consensus on. How do you feel about, the amount of preschool education that we're offering? I mean, I don't know. I don't even know off the top of my head, what those topics may be, but that might help us to fill in more of those blanks more specifically.
Yeah, I was originally thinking that way, Michael, as far as like, what do the employers want? But then I started thinking, I think after the last meeting, this kind of came up. I mean, maybe it's the graduates of Mettawee that have gone on to college and felt really well prepared in certain areas, but not others. I'd like to know what they are. Or someone that wasn't going to college, that they feel equipped, going into some kind of trade, should there be some kind of better opportunity or more education and kind of that direction. So it's so hard, it's so comprehensive, but trying to figure out how to get different perspectives from different areas, I mean, I know years ago when I went off to college, graduating from Granville, I was like, just like in deep water that first year trying to write papers in college because I hadn't done that much. I was so ill-equipped. So I think to get that kind of feedback on like, where are we strong and where are we lacking? So I don't know. It just probably made it more confusing.
No, but I think that sort of points toward a few more specific questions along those lines, you know,
Mhm.
in terms of what we want graduates to actually, walk away with skill set wise, not just more abstract things like the values, which they're very important, but, what else? In terms of how it might bear on decisions that we have to make as a board.
Mhm.
And so are you thinking that you collect this information and then organize it, right? Or you aggregate it, whatever. I don't know what, we haven't gotten to that part of the discussion. Like then when you got all this data, what are you doing with it? And then I'm still trying, I think, to play out in my mind what your purpose is. Is this goal development or ends policy development, or is it?
And I think it's ends policy development. I think that's what our goal is just to try to think really critically and carefully about what our community wants before we start writing these things on paper. And
Yeah.
So then if that's what you're thinking, then you would probably want to consider questions that cover the ends policy areas, which are academic, transferable skills, and civic ethics. So if you're trying to collect information to guide your policy development and you're developing ends policies, then I would, I guess, encourage you to think about the questions that get you to the development of those.
But maybe this survey would slightly change that ends and add a category or shape a category. So, I mean, to me, that's the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to manage. I was wondering about, now, obviously not everyone will have access to this, but maybe from an efficiency point of view, if we had an online form on which they could answer the questions from data collection, that might be a good way to do it for the majority of the people we're trying to reach. Maybe, I don't know, rather than a mailing. Some people would need a mailing, but
Yeah, I think I think the idea of doing it, having an electronic form is a good one, and putting it in the school and the town reports, and then having this data collection period being, the time that you're essentially align it with when your communities would receive their mailings, open up the other form the same time, so you're collecting over this 3 or 4 week period of time, and make those other mechanisms also by which you could collect information.
so, do you break it down by academic skills, values, or do you break it down by more the groups that would be answering it? Do you think about, maybe a question is, what do you feel you should graduate and, have preparedness for moving on in higher education and for, being employable, or for going into a trade. I mean, that's another way to break it down as opposed to.
so I'm just wondering if that's just like a flip on how we ask the same question, but like instead of saying what values are important to you, kind of like what values do you feel our graduates may be lacking, or what values do you think our schools need to put more emphasis on? It's the same question, but just asked in a different frame.
Mhm.
Well, I would like to ask it in a positive way and not ask what they're
Yeah.
lacking. That's a very
Yeah.
big mental call. And I think that's different. But if you're,
Excuse me.
you know, that's one thought. And Scott, just to, I've often wondered if we should have, not even if it's not a question, but a place where if the person that's filling out the form wants to identify themselves as a small business owner, as a farmer, as something that
I was thinking the same
where
thing.
they're coming from, because you
Mhm.
know, in real estate might say, boy, you better be good with math and you better be able to be communication and you better be able to write, where someone else may say, yeah, I have a completely different need. You know, I need you to really be focused on the welding and I need you to be able to, you know, I think there are different. So if I know who's answering this question without asking them and they could just give me that, then I'm getting information in a different way too, which would help identify.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's just a thought.
Yeah, no, I had that same thought when I was thinking about it. Had gone through like where they identify kind of what from where their point of view is coming. You know, is it?
It makes the difference.
Yeah, yeah.
It often makes a difference because I think that I understand that I've changed and evolved as I've grown. and so, you know, factors have come to me and opened my eyes or made me go, oh my gosh. So yeah, I think to be able to say, you know, I'm a former educator, or a this or a that might give somebody, okay, that's how that person, and then you can go back and look and say, well, the business owners and all the different farmers, and they were all thinking the same kinds of skill sets. We could then, you know, look at the data and clump it in several different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so
There
what are our next, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to mention that there are online, and I remember I was looking into this, like various websites about how to create community surveys. I remember doing this with the theater board, but it would be something that may be advantageous for us to just kind of glimpse into, because I know they're out there, you know, like different survey structures to help school boards, et cetera, come up with the kinds of questions that we're asking questions about.
A good idea. There probably is something.
I'll look around and see if I can't find any, because I remember specifically there were some things around those, you know, just this conversation that we're having. But in any case.
So I guess I'm just wondering what our next steps are, because we have to have this, we really need to have questions for decided on at our next meeting in order to get them into the reports in time.
Mhm.
So do we want to approach this from?
So Julie, I'd like to see the questions come from you. and then you can put them out to us. I don't know, whatever, as long as we follow the right protocols and it's open and we can say yes or no or edit or, and then I don't know, but that's something. Because I do want to keep it kind of small and.
Okay. So you want me to type up a document and email, I can distribute it out to you guys, but we can't chat about it.
Right.
But I could certainly come up with, I mean, I'm hearing an okay on the values and the skills being two separate questions. And I just don't know, I guess I'd like a little more help on what the third question should be. Or
Well,
if it's like,
know who's in the form. without asking for their name, which you should never do, in my opinion.
I
would like
agree.
to identify, maybe that's even before you get to the 2 questions. Maybe that's not even, maybe it's just, this is what we want. Would you like to tell us, where, whatever, where you're coming from, what, I don't know how to get that, but we
I'm
could.
envisioning something where it's like 2 or 3 questions and then a spot where it says, if you could please identify your, I don't know how I would put it, but basically like your position in the community, and then give examples. Like, are you a small business owner? Are you a parent? Are you a grandparent? Are you a former student in our district?
Okay.
Are you a student?
Other, and like leave a blank for people to fill it in, that
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking values, skills, and then maybe like is there a specific area that you would like our district to focus more on, and then list some examples like early education, pre-K, foreign language, just a few, and then other, and like leave a blank spot for them to fill that out. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I
And
do
you
think it's important to give people some things to rate, like you were saying, because otherwise, just a blank open-ended question, they might not be able to generate ideas as much. But
Right, so sort of like rank
yeah,
what values you think.
but Randy, you had mentioned tying this to the ends policy.
Yeah.
So then do we go back to that dispositions, the academic, and then social? Do we tie it back to those? Or
What you are ultimately wanting to do is take the results of this survey and use them to develop your policies. So even if, I think that the direction you're going will provide you with information. ENDS policies aren't typically sort of skill-based. We want, as far as like traditional academic content, it tends to be more broad than that. I think that my only thought based on what was just shared is that if you are going to generate a list and ask them to identify sort of their top priorities, I would encourage you to be really thoughtful as a board about what you put on that list. Because if you're going to be offering them something, you'll want to make sure that it's reflecting things
something
you considered to be something you're curious about, because they will morph to your ideas versus when you're open-ended, you're completely getting their authentic ideas.
right.
So,
No, I know that balance. Yeah, for sure.
so you want to be careful if you're doing that you've taken time as a board to determine what should be on that list and why, or why are we putting these on the list? You'd have a purpose for that.
Okay. So if I did another like Google Doc, or I can just distribute out to people, but I could collect feedback to my questions individually from board members, right? I just can't do a respond all. No one can hit respond all.
Right. And you don't want to kind of get in too much of a dialogue with even a board member about it. But if you gave ideas, they gave you a response, you then took those responses and kind of moved it forward for the board meeting, that's totally fine.
Okay. Okay. I can do that then, and then we'll finalize. We'll set aside a chunk of time to wordsmith in December.
okay.
Okay. Is everyone ready to move on from that then?
Please.
Okay. Board updates. Okay. Our next meeting is December 14th at 6:30. Same time, same place in your living room. Couple minutes for board self-evaluation. Um,
Well, I think our involvement was good. I think it was high. It certainly wasn't low.
Okay. I think our agenda was followed well.
Mhm.
And
Annual work plan. I think we're on track.
yeah, that got skipped too. Can we get that in our next agenda so that we can,
Yes, yes.
okay.
Yep.
I'm gonna say yes to everything on number 4 because we had our policy governance. I do think that that sort of helps us to these practices to,
Well, I'm gonna slightly disagree, Julie, and say that I really, unless you can explain to me the community engagement, I think we're trying to figure out how to engage the community. But I don't know. I don't know. So I guess that's my thing is, so anyway, I just don't know if it's an absolute yes for me on that one.
that you don't think we're spending sufficient time on community engagement because we don't know how we're doing it yet?
Well, yeah, yes, maybe that's it. Maybe I feel like, we're doing a lot of talking. I don't know if we're getting the word out there well enough. This is what we're doing. I don't know, but I guess I just feel like, doing to let them know what it is we're talking about. And I know we're sending the agenda out. So I don't know. I just,
Yeah, do you think, I'm still bothered by the fact that nobody comes to these meetings.
well, I think right now, getting anybody to any of the meetings is really hard with Zoom. I don't think,
People attend the Pollitt Select Board meetings. And no one came when it was in person.
No.
I don't know. It saddens me that that's why I've wanted so much to focus on community engagement this year, because it just isn't there for us.
Maybe that's one of your questions.
We could potentially
It's good.
things out there on the front porch forum, or perhaps extend the reach of our notifications to the community that we are having these meetings and what the date is. That might be a way of getting a little bit more of a community engagement. I know a lot of people look at that front porch forum. I don't know if if any questions of legality around this. I'm not like a Facebook person, but I don't know if that might be some venue to get more people engaged in paying attention to what we're doing once a month.
Yeah, maybe.
And Bob's writing down. Bob's good at this. He can help with that.
But I can definitely post it on the Mettawee Community School Facebook page. I don't mind doing that. When the agenda goes out, I could just put it on there, take a picture and post it.
Okay.
That seems like a good way, at least, to get out there to the parents that, hey, we're here and we're meeting on the 9th of November.
Mhm.
Right.
I also know that
you don't have to take your shoes off.
Deb Hawkins that also puts it out, the agenda out to her community, which I think is helpful. But I'm not sure if there's a place in Rupert that has a monthly email. We could maybe do something with that in Rupert.
Not that I'm aware of, other than the front porch forum, where it, but we could check with Andy, the town clerk. Yeah.
Okay. Consent agenda?
yes.
Something that went well tonight?
I think that we listen I think we really try hard to listen. So I feel as though my thoughts and concerns or my ideas are being at least listened to, that I'm being heard. So I appreciate that as being the person who's kind of out there, it appears to be.
I agree. I do. I very much feel, I feel that we hear each other, and I feel that we are respectful enough that it makes us think too. We don't just listen, but we think afterwards. I like that. Any concerns with tonight's meeting?
No.
I just, maybe we can, does Arlene respond to emails if we email her? I just want to make sure she's okay.
You know, I'll get a hold of Arlene. I'll make a point of doing that tomorrow and
Okay.
find out what's happening. I thought of it today and I just did not get to it, but I'll write it down here in addition to finding out about the town report deadline.
Okay.
What's going on that way.
Thanks.
And I just want to quickly jump in with one quick thing. I just very quickly went to, surveys, and there's a website that jumped up called School Perceptions, Measuring What Matters. And granted that I think they sell various models of surveys, etc., but it would be an excellent just place from a very quick glance just now. That might be a really useful thing for us to just mine a little bit for ideas and approaches. School Perceptions is this website, community.com, community surveys.
Okay.
Anyway, just wanted to interject that.
Thank you. Okay. How could we improve this meeting?
Have it start at 6:30 in the morning.
I hear you.
At least out.
Okay. Public comment. Yay.
Celeste, are there any comments on YouTube?
None. There's only one person watching. And it might be me.
It might be you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, Celeste. Okay. Hearing no public comment, I will call meeting adjourned at 8:37.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.
Yeah.